Ready, it is happening. We have a connection to YouTube and we are live. It's a lot easier than it used to be going live. It is Friday, November 24th, 2023, 4 o'clock p.m., which is the wrong time for Dog Shirt TV and the wrong time for In Lieu of Fun. But that's just the beginning of the problem, because if you look above me in my screen, to my right in some screens, to my left in some screens, you will see a gentleman who looks very little like Katja Hoyer. And his name is Matteo Carrabba, which is from Calabria, not from, Saxony or wherever Katja is from, because, and let's just be frank about it, we have had a very late cancellation. We were supposed to be discussing Katja Hoyer's excellent book, and I wish I could rail at you and say it's actually not that good a book. I was misled. It's an excellent book, and I was really looking forward to talking to her about it. And half an hour ago, she sent me a note saying that she had to cancel. I'm not sure whether we're going to reschedule this. Frankly, I'm a little pissed off. But I put out the word that it was emergency cheese night. Many of the cheese eaters, and I even prepared scotch and cheese, and many of the cheese eaters are asleep because they're in Europe or in Japan. But some of the cheese eaters one of the cheese eaters is in New Haven, Connecticut. And those of you who remember, no, he's in West Hartford, Connecticut, which for time zone purposes is really the same thing. And so it is emergency cheese night with Matteo. Maybe some others will show up. Maybe we'll get a Scott Shapiro appearance. Maybe we'll get a Kate Klonick appearance. Maybe we'll get a GDF appearance. Who knows? They're all invited. A lot of them are probably asleep. But moral of the story is, look, when someone invites you to go on and talk about your book on a show with, 8 or 9 people watching live, you don't cancel half an hour before. That's just not cool. So consider yourself finger wagged, Katja Hoyer. Matteo, good to see your face.
Good to see your face, Ben. In lieu of Katja talking about her book, do you want to tell us about one of your books?
I haven't written a book in a while. I'm thinking about writing another book.
Oh, talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about sitting through the entire Trump trial it's currently scheduled for March, and writing a kind of diary of the trial and using it as a way of talking about democracy protection and because everybody believes we have to protect democracy, and people say it, and I do too, and nobody has any idea how to do it. And so now we have this actual experiment in democracy protection, which is, what if you prosecuted a former president for trying to overthrow the results of an election? And it seems like it's a good opportunity to reflect on democracy protection and that sort of stuff. So I thought it would be an interesting window into the whole subject. Wow, look who's here. There's a whole lot of cool old In Lieu of Funners here. I suspect it's a different crowd than was going to turn up for Katja. So rather than do this the usual way, as people have things to say, just stick your hand up. I will make you audible. And Anne, the reason we are in a FT webinar is that when I set up Dog Shirt TV, I asked the people who were subscribing to it whether they preferred Zoom or Crowdcast. And rather to my surprise, they overwhelmingly prefer Zoom. And so I don't like Zoom very much myself, but I yielded to the public sentiment. And so we are using Zoom for this, and therefore using Zoom as well for Emergency Cheese Night, which is riding on the back of Dog Shirt TV, after all. Yeah, so that's about as far as I've thought about it, honestly, Matteo. The idea is, we have this natural experiment in democracy protection that everybody is presenting as something else, right? Like thinking about it as a the trial of the century, or thinking about it in terms of the election of 2024, or thinking of it in terms of whether lock him up, or whatever. But I'm like, well, okay, we have all these organizations devoted to protecting democracy, and it's a political slogan, and it's it's on all kinds of stuff. And then we have the U.S. Department of Justice that's actually, through the special counsel's office, doing something that we should at least think about in that framework. And so I thought, and the nature of the allegations in the trial raises all sorts of questions that you would think about like when people say what threatens democracy, it'd be like, oh, well, disinformation, yeah, that's there, right? The big lie. Oh, cult of personality, electoral manipulation, use of political violence, right? They're all right there. And so it's kind of struck me as a kind of an interesting way to look at the subject. Karen, I appreciate, Karen writes, by the way, Mr. Wittes, my name is Karen, but I would never hurl dog excrement at you, never. And I really appreciate that, because
I was shocked at that.
I
poll,
actually,
by the way.
I find that a little bit shocking. I assume all people named Karen hurl dog excrement at me all day, and it's just that I don't get hit by it because I'm far away. No, I'm kidding. I don't have any idea what the name of the person in question was. To be clear, I have no reason to believe her name was Karen. I have made a point of walking my dogs by her house almost every day since, just as a matter of, so to speak, marking territory. But I have not actually seen her. I would love to ask her name. Anne Kornhauser, the floor is yours.
Ben, Matteo.
Anne, it's lovely to hear your voice.
Ben, I can't connect with you anymore. That's not what I'm raising my hand about, but I have to preface the whole social media disaster and anyway, what's the best way to get in touch with you without bugging you on your phone?
Well, first of all, you are always welcome to bug me on your phone. Thank you. It is not a bug coming from you. But secondly, my email is you have, I believe, because you're on the In Lieu of Fun list. Okay. And you should feel free to email me anytime. As I'm not always good about getting emails responded to in a timely fashion, so always feel free to text me or
thank you very much.
And that goes for anybody on this call. I will put because this is on YouTube, I'm not going to put my I'm not going to say my contact information out loud, but I will put it in the chat.
That's very.
Whoops. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, that's all right. So
by mistake.
I have a thought about your book, your
Yeah,
potential book, which one is that I think it's an excellent idea. Um,
thank you.
the other, though, is that there are two big concepts, I think, at work here, and one is democracy, and the other is the rule of law, and they're related. So I think the democracy you were talking about is, sort of what's happening. That democracy is kind of on trial, right? Certain aspects of it, but I think also what the role of law is in preserving, protecting, even enhancing democracy is also something that is brought up by this trial, right?
Yeah, so I think if you think of the concept of liberal democracy as what we're trying to preserve in some sense, right? Liberal embeds the kind of rule of law concept, right? And democracy embeds the popular sovereignty concept. And I think we all have, at least on the center left, center right side of the equation. The MAGA world is just a different world. The hard left world is pretty different too, but the center left and moderate left world is, solidly democratic. And I think we all have a common vocabulary for what we're trying to protect. We just don't know how to do it. And, we've had, I think, 3 great experiments in how to do it. One was the 2020 election, which worked really well, except for the small matter that we have to do it again in a year. Right? And we have to win every time. And the anti-democratic forces kind of only have to win once. That's a little bit overstated, but not a lot overstated. And then you have the sort of mass mobilization at the time of the Trump election, which involved elements of litigation. It involved elements of a lot of other things. It involved mass rallies. It involved protests. It involved all kinds of things. That I think was another important experiment. But then there's this other experiment, which is going on now and involves both the rule of law and the attempt to overthrow the constitutional order. And it's going to play out in this very dramatic trial that, if you believe Tanya Chutkan, is going to start on March 5th. And I think just kind of treating it like a natural experiment in the protection of democracy is, kind of an interesting little project. So that's my current thought.
Cool. Well, I like it, and happy to suggest some readings, or
please shoot me
anything else.
I would love that.
Cool.
So nice. Your idea is to sit in the courtroom for this?
Oh, I'm going to sit in the courtroom anyway. It's the greatest show of the last,
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't miss it.
No, I wonder whether, to the extent that this trial is to be understood as an exercise in protecting democracy, it exists that way in the courtroom as opposed to in how what's going on in the courtroom is understood outside of the courtroom. I think of what happens in the courtroom as maybe being something else.
How do you mean?
I mean, I think that there's probably a useful distinction to draw between protecting democracy and simply practicing it. And what goes on in the courtroom seems to be fit better in the latter category. And I think that practicing it is probably a component of protecting democracy, but not even the main one. If there's a useful thing that's referred to when people say we need to protect democracy. It probably is some idea of from what. And I don't think that the thing that it's being protected against is going to be found in the courtroom of this particular trial.
Well, so look, I tend to agree with that, but there's number one, it's a criminal trial. It's designed to prosecute in a backward-looking sense crimes, not to protect democracy in a prospective sense. That said, all criminal justice has a prospective dimension, right? You don't simply punish murderers by way of retributive justice, right? You punish them to send a message to would-be murderers. And that's particularly true in the white-collar arena, where the individuals in question may not be particularly dangerous, right? So if you let Bernie Madoff roam the streets, people aren't going to die as a result of it. You lock him up both to punish him and also to send a message to other rapacious criminals that you're going to get him.
This actually, though, strikes me as maybe one of the few kinds of crimes for which that's not actually true.
How do you mean?
Because the nature of trying to overthrow the government is that it's the kind of crime where, if successful, you don't actually have to ever worry about the repercussions, in a way that's not true of Bernie Madoff, who could successfully defraud people and still have to worry about repercussions. It's a self-protecting sort of activity that always has negative repercussions if it fails, but is the kind of thing that, if successful, you don't really have to worry about that sort of thing.
So, look, I think there are several dimensions here. One is the retributive dimension with a forward-looking element. You want to punish for the post-election period with an eye toward dissuading future candidates who've lost from thinking that they can get away with, not acknowledging that they lost, or at least whatever they may say in acknowledgement, not yielding power semi-gracefully. Secondly, and the Justice Department will never admit this, but we all know it, there is a more direct prospective element to this, which is, just like you remove the murderer from the streets to prevent him from murdering again, you want to remove Donald Trump from the political arena. Now, this action doesn't entirely do that, because notionally you can win the presidency from prison, much less from a point of view of indictment. That said, I don't think it's irrelevant that there is an ongoing election, right? And so, when Trump calls this election interference, he is wrong in the sense of the motivation and intent, but he's not wrong in the sense of the effect, which is, you're actually taking an action that has potentially substantial electoral consequences. And then the third element, I think, is the unknown element, right? Which is, what does it do to a democratic culture when the democracy defends itself? And, and I don't purport to know the answer to this, but, we've never seen a situation before in which, you actually see this tool used as a democratic, whether it's the quills on the porcupine, or the, on the cat, or the, I don't know what the right metaphor is, the the poison on the surface of the skin of the poison dart frog, right? But this is some significant set of immunities that the society has that are releasing themselves into as antibodies into an immune system. And that's just kind of interesting to watch. You know, to what extent is it effective? To what extent is it ineffective? To what extent is it a necessary but insufficient condition? To what extent is it, you know, powerful in enabling something else? So that was, you know, that's the question that that I've been flirting with.
Yeah.
Pardon me, I'm going to cough now. Excuse me.
Excused.
So what are you up to these days, Matteo? You're sort of still a college student and you're sort of like a cheesemaker, is that right?
I'm a cheesemaker on a strictly amateur basis these days. And sort of a college student, more than sort of, actually. Technically, I'm very much a college student.
How full-time a college student are you? But you're
as much as anyone. So if by graduating you mean no longer being a college student, that will be true in May. If by graduating you mean wearing the gown and walking across the stage and all of that jazz, that was this past May.
All right. And what's your sort of what's the next Matteo moment?
It's a good question. That's a very good question. I frankly don't have the foggiest idea at this point.
That's good.
Oh. Any suggestions?
Well, I don't know. I went biking in New Zealand when I left college.
That's a pretty good one.
It was a good one. Put a bike on an airplane, looked at Oberlin, Ohio, and imagined a line through the center of the world and where it came out. And it came out somewhere west of Perth, Australia, which seemed like a lousy place to go biking. So I kind of widened the concentric circles a little bit. And I was like, oh, New Zealand, that looks great. So I went and rode around the South Island of New Zealand, which was awesome. And I haven't been back since, and I really, really want to go back. And so I think you should go spend some time in the South Island of New Zealand, and I'll come visit you.
You might have me persuaded. That's as good an idea as I've heard, actually. It's actually a really great idea.
It's the most beautiful place in the world.
But you've never been back?
What's that? But
you've never been back?
No, I've never. It's really far.
I've heard this about New Zealand.
I mean, yes, Daniel points out that Milford Sound is particularly spectacular, and he's right. Though it does essentially never stop raining there. The west coast of the South Island has an awesome annual quantity of rain. And it's got some birds that don't exist anywhere else in the world, some of which have very unusual sounds, including the bellbird, which basically sounds, and you
sounds
can look
like a bell.
Well, it sounds more like somebody took a large spoon and whacked a garbage can lid, a metal garbage can, it's just like clank, and it's awesome. And so yeah, I'm all for the South Island of New Zealand.
Ooh, Carmelo in the chat says like Scotland, which is also a place that I would love to go.
I have never been to Scotland.
I've also never been to Scotland.
Yeah, I think Scotland is I want to say Scotland is a little bit more like Iceland topologically than New Zealand, because New Zealand, as you approach the water, tends to get pretty tropical pretty fast. And so it's like the tropics, at least the north side of it, is tropical at the coast and then like Scotland as you go higher.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's got to be the only country in the world that has great skiing as close to great beaches as it has.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Yeah.
All right.
This may be something to look into.
I'm just saying it. I'm just telling you, it's pretty awesome. And Kate hates it.
Right.
Kate is the only person I know who is against New Zealand. But you know. All right, what else is on the agenda? So Greek chorus, you guys should chime in with agenda items. Anne Kornhauser is your model. And she's surprised at Daniel. We got a lull.
Here, grab. Is that Daniel, the old in lieu of fun Daniel?
Let's find out. I think it is. Let's let him talk. Daniel, are you in your native habitat?
Yes, I am not in my native habitat, but it is the old in lieu of fun, Daniel.
It is great to hear your voice, if not to see you
Hi,
blending
Daniel.
in with your chair.
It's good to see everyone.
How are you? Where are you these days? You're in the area, yeah? You're in the
I am
DC
still in
area?
DC. I do have to be a little careful because of my employer. So I will keep it at that.
Excellent. Although it is great to know, which I knew because you wrote to me, that you are now employed.
Correct.
Which the last time we talked, you were a graduate student.
Correct, and still a graduate student, but finishing this December. So
very cool. Well, congratulations to you, and give my best regards to your chair, who only has Auntie's very white chair as competition for the best regular chair on In Lieu of Fun, and be in touch.
Sounds good. Will do.
All right. Next agenda item, and I want important input on this from the chat. When you are committed to doing a show, admittedly a show with a very small audience, and the show has been announced like for a month, and the author has read the book, and the book is enough pages.
The host has read the book.
Yeah, the host has read the book.
You said the author has read the book.
Oh, the author has written the book, but the host has read the book. What is the minimum amount of time that it is polite without a hospitalization or vomiting to cancel on? I mean, there are physical conditions that you can't go on with, but short of those, what's the minimum? Shannon says a week. No, Steve, vomiting definitely. Look, if you're gonna vomit on the show, you gotta cancel, right? I mean, that's just like you get away with. There's no moral obligation to go on the show if you're gonna throw up. The minimum
non-sickness
for a non-physical ailment.
I would say that the amount of time depends on the reason for canceling. The more severe the reason, the more time you need to give to cancel. For a no reason cancel, which is I'd rather just not do this anymore.
Well, this was a little better than that.
But not much. well, I don't really know, but
It wasn't great.
So let's say hypothetically, if it wasn't, I just don't want to do this anymore. I think it's a week.
You think so? We've got anywhere
To have
from
to
10
totally
minutes.
erase
Alice Watson
any
says 48 hours. John Z says 10 minutes. Mateo says a week.
48 hours for no cause, Alice. That's too soon.
I mean, all I'm saying right now is 35 minutes, not good enough, right? I need time to get like Mateo on the line, if I had had an hour, I could have shamed KK into joining, So Anne says 0. Does 0 mean it's polite to cancel at any time, or that it's not polite to cancel at all? I'm kind of going with the 72 hours.
72 hours is good if there's a weak but real reason.
Yeah, I mean, there was a real reason here.
Then 72, I think, is okay.
Richard Wattenbarger, the floor is yours.
Hello.
Hello.
Happy holidays. Happy Black Friday. So,
To all who celebrate. And by the way,
yes.
As a Jew, I don't deal with Black Friday, but is the traditional celebration of Black Friday beating up other people in line at a Target or a Best Buy, or is there some other traditional observation of Black Friday?
Well, I think it's moved online now. So, but I do miss the days of trampling people to death. Oh boy, weren't those the days? No.
I think that is one of the great American, other cultures, trample people to death in the Hajj or serious religious pilgrimages. We do it for like big box stores. It shows where the real God is in America. I love it.
Well, that's it. Yes, that's a theological insight. Believe it or not.
No, I mean, at the Kaaba.
No, you're right.
About something important. So,
hey, I have a request for you. So I'm out here in this big world, being confused by the big world, and one of the things that helps me make sense of it is the Trump trials, and something else that would help me make sense of it would be some sort of a regular sifting through and getting like the straight information, the best information, the most reliable information that we can on what's going on with the war in Gaza, because we really, I heard you did, I guess, of course, you did some shows about it on Lawfare Podcast right when it broke out, and then there was another one that you had done, the really great show that you had on the West Bank in the midst of all of this. And I thought, this is the information that I really want to have. And meanwhile, I'm looking at, most of us don't have the time to go out and round up reliable information, because that's just not because that would be almost like a full-time job. I'm just wondering, are there people at law? Well, I mean, I would think at Lawfare, you've got people watching these things much more closely than the rest of us. Is there any possibility of having something like that, weekly, just getting the best information out there?
We're working on it. So, so first of all, it's an extremely hard problem, not just because the issue is hard, which it is, but because the information is sporadic and highly imperfect. The information available is it changes. It's very unstable, right? It changes sometimes by the hour or by the minute. The pace of the news cycle is much faster than the pace of the reliable information. And so, we're also not, except in discrete areas, we're really not a news shop, and we don't have, I have lots of friends on the ground, but I don't have people who work for me on the ground in either Israel or particularly Gaza. And so it's actually a very hard situation to be reliable rather than opinionated about. That said, we are working on something, and I would just say I am very sympathetic to the suggestion, and I've been working with some Brookings colleagues and some colleagues at some other organizations who may be in a position to work with us to do something. But it's very hard. If you almost anything you reported in the last 48 hours about the hostage release and ceasefire situation was going to turn out to be wrong. And so it's a complicated, like, I don't want to do it unless we can do it very well. And the process of doing it well takes a lot of putting in place. So it's a great idea. We're working on it. The Trump trials was not born in a day either. And this one kind of came out of left field in a lot of different ways. And so, we will do something more regular than we've been. And the trick is to do it in a fashion that keeps up quality control.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the things I appreciated about that particular show I mentioned about the West Bank was that I think then you were dealing with, I think to some extent, what was already known and corroborated to the extent that was possible, but also it was not like up to the minute. What are the latest headlines? What do we, which is not going to be reliable. But the sorts of things that have the longer term perspective, like well, okay, now we're 2 weeks out from this, or 1 week out from whatever particular event, by which time some of that information is taken out. And I think it's those being able to hear good analysis, basically. And that was the thing that I appreciated too about that particular show, was just the analysis from various people that so they're taking the long view, basically. And that seems to me about the only way you're going to get anything right, if you're, which it may not be particularly gratifying to people who want to know now, but
no, I think that's right. There's a limited number of subjects that you can do that about easily, right? So West Bank and East Jerusalem is one of them, because it's changed much less since October 7th, though it hasn't changed though it has changed, right? I mean, 200 Palestinians have been killed, and
Right.
that's a lot more than is normal for this period of time. And so, you're not talking about a static situation. There are some other areas where you can add value without making up a lot of information. They're, but they don't involve in a lot of areas, the thing that you can really do is explain what's not knowable.
Right.
And that is relatively boring for a lot of viewers to be told what you can't know, though I think it's very important. Look, an area that's similar to the West Bank in this regard is Israeli and Palestinian public opinion, about which there has been some good research done over the last few months. The data from Israel is completely fascinating. And, I think there's stuff that you can focus on that's not changing by the minute. But it does requires from, a certain amount of discipline about not jumping to the things that everybody wants to talk about because they want to emote about, and also a certain discipline from the audience that this is not going to be the place that you go to hear either the stand with Israel or Palestine will be free stuff. There's a lot of places you can go for that, but this isn't going to be one of them. So we are working on it, and it's hard, and I hope to have an announcement about it relatively soon.
That would be nice. I think about things like I think about the conversations I've had with people recently about the situation there, and things come up like well, is the PA going to be able? Would the PA be able to take over in Gaza after all of this, and what the situation is with the PA and things like that? And so, I think a lot of those. I think a lot of those longer term things that people don't have such a good sense of the intricacies of, that's valuable. That's valuable information that even that is kind of hard to get. So basically, I'm trying to give you ideas that might. I know it's difficult, but that might. I don't know. Maybe the. I don't want to say easy wins, but something in that vein.
It's a very good idea. And it's interesting that you use the term the situation, because there is a Hebrew word, hamatzav, which literally means the situation, which is a reference to, it is used to refer to the geopolitical situation of Israel vis-a-vis Palestinians and the states around them. So when people refer in Hebrew to hamatzav, they are saying exactly what you just said with respect to the situation.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Alice Lee, the floor is yours. Are you still in Austria?
Yes, I am.
Welcome back, not to the United States, but to In Lieu of Fun.
Good to be back. I'm glad I caught the email.
And how is your refrigerator?
Let's see. And so I think the refrigerator all along was my laptop, but here's up close and personal with the refrigerator.
Yeah, and not especially loud.
No.
For those who don't remember, Alice had an exceptionally loud refrigerator.
I thought that this was you fumbling the old "is your refrigerator running" gag.
No, I would never do that. I mean, I'm a father, but that's a dad joke that's even beyond me. No, Alice had a particularly loud refrigerator that would come through like a steamroller when she was talking on In Lieu of Fun.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I do think that was actually my laptop fan, and I've
Oh,
since
the
gotten,
laptop fan?
yes.
It'll always be your refrigerator to me.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it is a loud refrigerator. This is very old. So the Somerville one is now the Vienna one, and the Vienna one's probably from the 70s.
And how much longer are you in Vienna for?
Probably one semester. There's a lot less concern about going over here because it's, you're out no money if you're Austrian and $800 roughly if you're American. So less
So there's
like
an option for you, Matteo.
yeah.
You're muted.
Oh, I was saying, yeah, that sounds pretty nice.
And it's all in English too. So yeah. So yeah,
Wow.
just, drop me a line and we can talk about it. And the visa stuff was pretty easy. So
Wow.
yeah,
I
let me know.
may take you up on that.
Yeah, feel free.
What time is it there now?
Oh, like not quite 11. 6 hours off.
Is it too late? Your presence here suggests that it's being in continental Europe is not too late to do a Zoom conversation about somebody's book. Is that right?
I wouldn't say it was too late. I missed the beginning though. So
I mean, I'm just saying because if you were in England, you would be closer here, right?
that is true.
You'd be
I don't
like,
know who I'm maligning by agreeing with you because
well, there's somebody who was supposed to be the guest on this show to discuss her book who canceled half an hour before the show. And, we're not bitter about that or anything, but I'm just checking that it wasn't unreasonable to schedule the time.
Yeah. No, it's not. And especially 1 hour earlier would be quite reasonable. 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
I was just checking. Okay. Well, do you have an agenda item?
I do not. Just happy to be here.
Well, it's great to hear your voice. Let us know when you're back in the country as well as back on In Lieu of Fun. But seriously, I have a serious question for y'all, which is, should there be regular or semi-regular cheese nights?
If they're on the earlier side. And I actually did remember I had something I wanted to tell you. I went to my third opera. Second opera?
Oh, what did you see?
No, my third opera, Othello.
Oh, that's like my favorite opera ever written.
Really? Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So I've made up for Peter Grimes #1. And
that's a rough slog.
Yeah, Peter Grimes #1, The Return of Ulysses, I think, and then now Othello.
So Return of Ulysses, the old Monteverdi Return of Ulysses?
I think so, a weird one.
Yeah, so
according to my friend I went with.
So that's a gorgeous piece of music. I don't know how well it performs on stage, but it's a gorgeous piece of music. Peter Grimes is rough. I mean,
that was my first opera.
Ooh. And Otello, I mean, we're here with Richard Wattenbarger, who is like an actual music historian and forgets more about this shit in a week than I have ever known. But Otello is one of my 2 or 3 very favorite operas ever written, and is the second opera that I learned beginning to end, note for note, word for word. The first was Porgy and Bess, and then I don't know, Otello grabbed me by the throat when I was like 16 or 17, and I have actually never really loved the Shakespeare play ever since I got hooked on the opera. I think it's actually better than the play, which is heretical to say, but and Vienna is, I'm sure, a lovely a lovely house in which to see it. How did you like it?
I'm sure. I liked it. So I had a friend visiting me, and since you can get very inexpensive opera tickets if you wait in line the morning of, We kind of went in saying we'll stay for one act at least, and if we're not feeling it, we can leave. But when we stayed for the whole thing, it was very nice.
Yeah. So Act One of Othello is an incredible piece of music, and then Act Two is even greater. And the end of Act Two is like stir your soul. So yeah, all of you should listen to Othello. There are at least 3 great recordings of it. Richard can tell you there are more. And but the 70s era Placido Domingo with James Levine is wonderful, and Cheryl Milne. And the Toscanini is fabulous. So good to hear your voice, Alice. And
Yes,
let me
you.
know when you're back in the country.
All right, I will.
All right, who else has an agenda? Oh, Greg has an agenda item. Greg, the floor is yours.
Hey, good to see you guys and everyone in the chat. 2 small things. One, kind of shocking how quickly the issues of Ukraine have disappeared from the news, since all that's going on in Israel and Gaza. It's amazing that we can't keep, 2 thoughts in our head at the same time. And then similarly, kind of connected to the earlier question about democracy, I think one of the things that's being missed about democracy is, and maybe it's just my perspective, that I think that democracy, or the idea of it at least, is good for capitalism. And I think the world is going to get a little bit more difficult to, sort of make a buck as authoritarians push further and further in different parts of the world. Even China, for one, is really going to struggle if they can't figure out that line, that balance between being sort of an economic engine, where they started pretending that they were headed towards democracy. At least they sort of gave a nod to it. And now Russia has turned itself back into the USSR, and that's sort of put a giant roadblock, on world commerce, basically.
Yeah, so that's all correct. I want to focus on your first point, which is that people really are having trouble holding 2 ideas in their head at the same time.
Yeah.
And this is really terrible for the Ukrainians, because they actually need much more support than the Israelis need. The Israelis,
Yeah,
the Israelis have a very deep, very functioning economy that is mostly self-sufficient for armaments purposes. We give them, I don't know, $3.5 billion of aid a year, which is a relatively small percentage of their economy. And they have a domestic armaments manufacturing industry that is, quite advanced. And what they need from us right now is a certain amount of depth. And they'll be just fine if it takes a while, or if it didn't happen at all. The Ukrainian situation is very different. They have a 700-mile front. They are short of ammunition across it. And they lack altogether certain types of heavy weapons, particularly long-range rockets, which we keep from them intentionally because we don't want them to use them against Russia proper, but also certain types of air power. And so, some of this is a hyper caution on our part. Some of it is just that the situation developed very fast and it was a kind of underdeveloped military that overperformed. But the point is, if they don't get relief from us quickly, they're actually, that is an acute situation for them immediately, whereas it is not for the Israelis. The Israelis are fighting a weaker power, the Ukrainians are fighting a stronger power. And so, there's a sense in which our ability to forget about it is, it's really lethal from their point of view, and they're terrified about it, and there is nothing that their friends in the United States can say really that alleviates that, because in fact, you can't get anything done without the consent of the Republican leadership in the House, which is not being cooperative.
I'm
And
sorry, did you say the word leadership?
with appropriate scare quotes, and
exactly.
and to be fair to the Republican leadership in the House, for whom I assure you my enthusiasm is under control. What happened to McCarthy shows that they actually have very little running room, because the inpatients are running the asylum, and so it's not at all clear how you get this done in a fashion that is not very dangerous to the Ukrainians, and I'm very worried about it. And I think there's a real danger that we, without anybody really meaning to, except Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump, really stab our ally in the back on this one, without the administration wanting to, without the majority of Congress wanting to, just because it is much easier to not get things done than to get things done. So, that's my, it's a big worry, and the situation keeps getting worse. All right. It is 4:57, which means we're about to wrap up. Matteo Carrabba, you are a great American for showing up on extreme short notice. You get a gold star right there on your forehead.
Thank you for the recognition.
What's that?
I say thank you for it really wasn't that hard, which makes the last minute cancellation all the more shameful.
The best things in life are not that hard. We will be back. I have no idea when. We're going to do, I think cheese nights are going to have to be rehabbed. So keep an eye on the email list. I have to confer with KK about cheese nights. There have been some developments, like that she's living in France, that make scheduling a little complicated. Been some other developments too, minor ones, small ones. But we're going to get this done. And I'll have to decide whether to reschedule with today's scheduled guest.
Maybe put it to a vote.
Oh, yeah, good point. We're going to put it to the vote, to the Greek chorus. Should I'm going to force a choice here. There's no abstentions, but there is a third option. All right, here you go. There's the poll. Everybody should vote. Wow, y'all are a very forgiving lot.
I'm almost as surprised about this as I was about the dog poop trash thing.
All right. Yes, reschedule has prevailed. No, it's prevailed by a 2-to-1 margin, and no and the death penalty only got 5%. You're all great Americans. It is lovely to see your names and hear your voices, if not see your faces. That is one advantage to Crowdcast. And we will do this again soon. Cheers, Matteo.
Cheers, Ben. Was there not a traditional sign off?
Was there?
Oh, it was something about hours till the next one, but you obviously can't do that.
Yeah, but I can't do that.
Yeah, I can't do that.
We will be back in some unknown number of hours. And until then, Matteo, and then you're supposed to say something wise.
Oh, keep your appointments.